Investigative journalist Paul Holden has caused quite a stir in Keir Starmer's Politburo. His new book, The Fraud, that chronicles the duplicitous rise to power of the Labour leader, has already led to the resignation of Paul Ovenden from Starmer's top team and reignited the discussion around the funding of the Starmer-supporting dark money-backed think tank Labour Together. It's well known now that Labour Together, then headed by Starmer Chief of Staff Morgan McSweeney, failed to declare £700,000 of donations and was fined by the Electoral Commission over it. But Holden expands in his book on how that money was used behind the scenes to prepare for Starmer to be Corbyn's heir apparent. Here he is discussing this on yesterday's Politics Live.
And that money is not just incidental. This is not incidental to the story. That was money that was then used to fundamentally transform our politics. Because on the one hand, Morgan McSweeney was using that money to pay for polling, to incubate the leadership of Keir Starmer. At the same time, he was running what I think is a rather despicable campaign, entirely secret, without any disclosure at all in the public, destroying the Labour Party from within to make sure that the Labour Party under Jeremy Corbyn couldn't win the 2019 general election, or with a pot of money that's not being declared. Now, I raise issues with that because I don't think even though the Electoral Commission has made a finding there, I don't feel that story is over, because I have serious questions, serious reservations about whether those donations were not reported purposefully. And in fact, I make an argument in my book.
Because Morgan McSweeney, they say that Labour Together have said that they were an administrative error.
Which on the face of the evidence really makes no sense to me. And I'll give you an example, if I may. It was back in 2023, I submitted a Freedom of Information request to the Electoral Commission, and they provided me with all the correspondence between Mr. Morgan McSweeney and the Electoral Commission. And it shows that in November 2017, Morgan McSweeney called the Electoral Commission and said, I don't think we should report donations. I don't want to report donations. We're not a campaigning organisation. And the Electoral Commission wrote back to him on multiple occasions and said, no, you have an absolute duty to report donations. It's absolutely clear that Morgan McSweeney was told over the course of a number of months of his duty to report donations and how to report those donations.
Now, is it any wonder why a bunch of donations from billionaires, from hedge funders, from business tycoons, and from Israeli lobbyists, he might want to hide potentially? And again, I'm not saying this is what was being done, but you can see the rationale, if that was the case, for wanting to ensure people didn't know who he was getting his money from, to ensure that people realised the kind of people who'd back that campaign. It's really important to understand, people don't donate to political causes and political parties, especially from the business community, if they don't think they're going to get ROI, right? Like, there's a reason that during the Corbyn era of leadership within Labour, the broader Labour Party didn't really receive huge donations from those kinds of people. They were specifically pouring money into a group that was there to oppose what Jeremy Corbyn stood for, fundamentally because that is the oppositional nature of the Labour movement and capital. Like, rich people represent capital, and everybody else who is the ones who are being paid Labour wages by capital, they have a conflicting relationship. There would be no reason for the rich to fund a political party that fundamentally stands in opposition to the rich. So you'd want to get rid of someone like Corbyn who held those policy positions. Again, I'm not saying this is what happened, right? Of course, there'd be no evidence for this. But this would be something that would be likely, in my mind, to be a material interest that they would have to not donate, to not declare that funding. Now, on the panel with him was Labour MP for Milton Keynes Central Emily Darlington. This is how she responded.
I mean, it wasn't much of a secretive organisation. Everybody knew about it at the time.
That's not true.
I was a member. I wasn't affiliated. No,
so
I was a member of the Labour Party.
Okay, so did you know what Labour Together was doing behind the scenes?
No, but I knew about
so it was
them.
secretive.
I also knew about there were different organisations around. Unions 21 was around
okay, but
still
what
then.
Did you think Labour Together was doing
we
at
had
the
the
time?
Labour left.
What do you think Labour Together was doing between 2017 and 2020?
So,
what did you know about?
What I knew about was I had a party that I had supported.
That's not the question I'm asking.
Hang on, you're asking me what my recollection in 2017 was.
Of what
so
Labour Together was doing.
I knew of them. That's all I knew.
Okay.
I wasn't involved with them. But what I did know was my party was spiralling down. It had anti-Semitism happening. It had intolerance of any view that wasn't within the Corbyn little sphere. It was not nice to be a member of the party at the time, and it was unelectable. And I worked my butt off locally in Milton Keynes, making sure that we had policies in Milton Keynes so we could lead the council and then hopefully prepare for government, which we've now done.
Now, again, trying to bring up the anti-Semitism stuff as if it's like received wisdom, when we all now know the reality. Anushka Astana did a really great expose on the reality, which was that a lot of these anti-Semitism things were deliberately leaked to the press from unaffiliated Facebook groups as examples of Labour anti-Semitism by people connected to Morgan McSweeney specifically. And when you looked at the overall internal polling about who agreed with anti-Semitic statements, there was far more anti-Semitism, according to those statistics, within the Conservative Party and within UKIP than there was within Labour at the time, who are very low in terms of the overall anti-Semitism. So the idea that we can just continue to accept that this was an anti-Semitic party when clearly it wasn't, I don't know how they still get away with it. When it comes to the idea of Corbyn not tolerating views outside of what he believed, that the temerity, like the barefaced cheek, when Corbyn was the one who was appointing people from the Labour right to his shadow cabinet in opposition to try and build the so-called unity that Keir Starmer claims to believe in the run-up to the leadership election and still claims to believe in, is ridiculous. When there was no purge, there was no Stalinism, there was no excising of Labour right members of neither the PLP nor the membership during the time when Jeremy Corbyn was leader of the Labour Party. But under Keir Starmer, that's exactly what happened. It's exactly what happened. He literally openly said, right, if you don't like the fact that I've changed the party and made it unrecognisable, you can leave. They purged people from the party, Jewish people from the party, on completely vexatious, in my mind, claims of anti-Semitism, which seems kind of prima facie ridiculous. It's Keir Starmer and the Labour right and Morgan McSweeney and their little Politburo. They were the intolerant ones. They were the ones who got rid of people for completely spurious reasons. And it was Corbyn who tried to unify the party. This is a complete rewriting of history. Now, Paul Holden was understandably not impressed with her non-answer to the question at hand, and he pushed her further on Labour Together's alleged wrecking campaign.
It doesn't disturb you at all that they were running a 2.5-year campaign to make sure the Labour Party lost under Jeremy Corbyn, a Labour Party that you were part of. You don't think that's a problem?
So we are used to having those campaigns in the Labour Party. Momentum, again, that was an organisation that was set up to bring Jeremy Corbyn to power.
Who were declaring publicly their funding, they were declaring with the law and what they were doing,
this is where,
and Labour Together was not.
This is where I agree with you. Everyone should declare publicly their funding. And we need more transparency in campaign finance. And so it's not just my challenge to reform and not just my challenge to Labour. We have a huge gap in our electoral system where electoral law does not apply to social media and to online platforms. And we need to be closing that. Neither Electoral Commission has no responsibility for the online space and the Online Safety Act has no responsibility for electoral law. And we need to close that. I think, absolutely, I think transparency and closing that loop is so important.
You have to act like it's important. Because what you have right now is a Chief of Staff to the Prime Minister who broke the law. We know he broke the law. He's found guilty of breaking the law. And nobody seems in the Labour Party to care about that. At the same time, Labour Together's directors were Steve Reid, a cabinet minister, Lisa Nandy, a cabinet minister. That organisation broke the law for 2.5 years. Why do you not care about that fact?
It's incredible, really, to try and compare Momentum to Labour Together when Momentum at no point, at any point, even in the kind of post-Corbyn Momentum in exile days, where they're a pretty toothless organisation, at no point have they ever tried to deliberately tank any election campaigns. At no point have they, outside of being oppositional in terms of ideology, decided to try and undermine the Labour Party kind of broadly. Because that's what was being done. The people within Labour Together, Morgan McSweeney was explicit, and according to Anushka Astana anyway, at saying that the worst possible situation for them was a Corbyn administration, right? We know from the Ford report about the Ergen House arrangement. We know full well about the kind of reactions people on the Labour right had when they found out that they'd achieved a hung parliament in 2017. And they weren't happy because they realised that it would keep Corbyn in the leadership position at the same time, right? And it's, again, so interesting to watch her continue to avoid the question about the reality of what she knew about Labour Together. And just go, oh, it was just a campaigning organisation. We all knew it was there. Well, it was obviously they were lying. They started off by saying that they were about Labour unity, when we now know from all of the information we have from Paul Holden, from Martin Ford, everything that we know internally from the Labour files, and all of the different kind of piecemeal information that we've managed to get together about the reality of what was happening in the background between 2017 and 2020 to try and hoodwink the membership through the lies that Keir Starmer told during the election campaign, having tanked the election campaigns in 2017 and 2019 to get to that point. And she can't even muster up the ability to even condemn what has happened, where these people have been found to have broken electoral law. Again, it just shows you that principle is something that doesn't belong in the current Labour Party. They can't find themselves the spine or the sincerity to at least stand on some level of principle to condemn what had happened and to at least acknowledge the reality rather than pivoting to, well, Corbyn was unelectable. That may be the case. It may be the case that even if there wasn't an Ergen House arrangement, it may have been the case that without the internal alleged wrecking campaign, Corbyn would still have lost in 2017. I'm perfectly willing to accept that fact, right? But we can't know that until it's tested in a vacuum. And unfortunately, trying to win an election whilst your own members from the right of your party are trying to deliberately tank the election is not a vacuum with which to test that hypothesis. Kieran, what have you made so far of Paul Holden's revelations, and what did you make of Emily Darlington's response?
Well, sometimes the topics on these shows are like pieces of a puzzle, and you put them together one by one. And actually, this speaks to the previous topic we covered. Why is it that Keir Starmer, Rachel Reeves, and the whole shebang will ask every wrong question? Well, it's partly, I'm not saying it's solely, but it's partly because of the kind of thing that these revelations show us, which is that from the very beginning, before the very beginning, Keir Starmer has been, and his people have been in the pockets of big business, of capital, of the people who do not want taxes to rise, either on wealth or on incomes, but principally on wealth and assets. And they don't want a fundamentally different political economy. They don't want different industrial relations. This works pretty well. A lot of this works pretty well for them. And if they do want changes, it's in the opposite direction. A direction that doesn't favour the general public and favours their interests, rather. So I think, as I say, pieces of a puzzle. They're not unrelated. That's the first thing. And also, just an obvious contradiction about what the Labour MP was saying just there, which is she's there saying that the Labour Party between 2015 and 2019, but particularly in 2017 onwards, was a kind of Stalinist operation. And then, on the other hand, she's acknowledging this organisation within the Labour Party that didn't even declare its finances, and then comparing it to Momentum and accepting that Momentum did declare its finances. So, I mean, it doesn't sound like a very successful Stalinist operation to me for there to be a Labour Together or any other group that's trying to actively fell the leadership. And that brings me to, I think, an undeniable point. Jeremy Corbyn, God love him, and I do love him, his biggest flaw as leader of the Labour Party was that he was not authoritarian enough. And that isn't to say that I think people should, the Labour Party should play the petty games that Keir Starmer plays now and kick out, people because they have slightly dissenting views. I think the Labour Party has always fundamentally been a party that reflects the interests of capital, and that sometimes it is hijacked by the left for its proper purpose rather than the other way around. Nonetheless, it's pretty clear to me that Jeremy Corbyn could have done a series of things, one of them being, for example, mandatory reselection, in which MPs have to stand again in their seats before they stand at a general election internally to justify their candidacy at an election. And that was seriously on the table, and it was actually the leadership bottled it. And that has to be acknowledged. Something like that, a disciplinary mechanism like that, would have at least guaranteed a modicum of respect from Labour Party MPs who, as you have alluded to, Helena, were day after day routinely briefing against the leadership in the most damaging, toxic possible way, including helping with a false anti-Semitism scandal, a false epidemic of anti-Semitism. So, or with the impression of an epidemic of anti-Semitism. So, yeah, one of the major flaws of Jeremy Corbyn's leadership is that he wasn't, can I say, Keir Starmer enough? All I mean by that is authoritarian enough, but for the left, which is to say asking for a modicum of respect and discipline from his own fucking MPs. And a related point, and this is why it's so unbelievably depressing that didn't happen. You do look back and you think, wow, that Labour Party had 500,000 members. Overwhelming number of them came in after 2015. So we can, I think, extrapolate from that. An overwhelming number of them were there to support a Jeremy Corbyn-led political agenda, broadly speaking. They might not have thought he was the second coming, but they were broadly there from the left or for the left. And yet, because of a lack of discipline of the party vanguard in other areas of the party, MPs in particular, everything slipped away. Now, again, I agree with you, Helena. We can't sit here and say, oh, he would have won the election if it were it not for that and were it not for hostile media. I think those things were instrumental factors. I don't know if they were decisive or sufficient. But the point there stands. And I think, I'd refer, I suppose, just to summarize everything, to a point I briefly made earlier. The Labour Party, if you look at the history of the Labour Party in its relatively short time of existence, 125 years, 126 years, it's more often than not the party of the Morgan McSweeney, Keir Starmer worldview. And there are these kind of aberrations, these moments of schism in which every 2 or 3 decades the left gets control again. So this is all unsurprising to me, I'm sorry to say. I know I sound a bit jaded today. I probably sound a bit jaded today, but yes, it's unsurprising.
You know what's interesting? I think that being slightly more of a Keir Starmer in terms of the kind of holding the whip hand within the party is certainly right, but there would have been more of a reason to do it, right? Because fundamentally, whilst Keir Starmer is just purging people for not agreeing with the groupthink, the fundamental problem with the PLP and why a lot of them deserved to lose access to being the candidate for those specific seats was because of their desire to undermine not just the leadership, but the membership that supported that leader, right? That's fundamentally the point. Like, no one is going to complain about having a diversity of opinions in the party unless that is specifically being used to try and undermine what the membership have specifically voted for in the leader himself, Jeremy Corbyn, and the platform that he was putting forward, right? Like, this was the whole thing, is that the PLP told the membership, no, you're wrong. You can't have Jeremy Corbyn as leader. You can't have these left-wing policies as part of the policy prospectus, even though they voted on conference. We refuse to let you. We will force Jeremy Corbyn to go through another leadership election. We will do the referendum again. You will choose differently this time. And the membership rejected Owen Smith, just like they rejected Andy Burnham, Yvette Cooper, and Liz Kendall the first time round. It was fundamental that the PLP were in essentially a wrecking campaign, not just against the broad Labour Party, but the members that it represented, which is fundamentally the base of the Labour Party. They are the ones who fund the election campaigns. They're the ones who drive the movement. They're the ones pounding the pavement on the doorsteps to get Labour elected as the face of the Labour movement. And that's why the PLP fundamentally needed to get a little bit of the Keir Starmer treatment from Jeremy Corbyn, is because they were disloyal to the people who were there to actually get Labour elected, and the ones who are out there putting these people into their almost 6-figure funded careers in government. And that is what is unforgivable. To talk about disunity when the PLP were fundamentally opposed to the membership that they are supposed to represent, right? That's how democracy works. Democracy is about representing the people, not the other way around, and they fundamentally failed in that prospectus, and they fundamentally are the real reason as to why the Labour Party was disunited from 2015 to 2019.